speak in front of this audience. Kieran, thanks a lot for the opportunity. I'll explain the title literally in a second. We've been busy for the past many years building custom solutions for media trading. And the word custom seems to correlate a lot with the theme of this meeting. So what Kieran wanted from us was to share insight about things which we see today, how customization is happening, what are the pressures, how it actually is played across the ecosystem, rather than our ideas about how the future should look like. And hence the title. We'll take the existing boxes and try to unpack them. And I mean, it may be a bit unsightly, but still. So that's roughly how our clients look like. Early on, it was about exchanges. It was about people who came into this very early. And today, we're moving into early majority. And in particular, we see some e-commerce players. We see some brands with requests for custom technology. So some of that we're building. But more interestingly, across the ecosystem, those type of people, they influence how the technology should work because they now recognize their interests and they're pushing for those interests to be taken into consideration. So that's a super simplified version of the demand side of our ecosystem. So DSP is there to create best results for an agency, usually for an agency. I mean, every now and then they get too worried about their operational efficiency. They slap a media clearing fee, but I mean, 50-odd%. But anyway, other than that, they're there to help agency. Now, agency there is, I mean, they have the client, as the client is the advertiser, and usually they work on delivering best results for these guys. Again, every now and then they get carried away, they arbitrage the media too far, they sell something to the advertiser for $5 instead of 50 cents, but that's just because they can get away with it. Other than that, their main focus is helping the advertiser. Now, the advertiser is a very interesting position. They have their metrics. They want to be focused on ROI. They want to focus on the performance of individual product lines and marketing for those product lines. Now, what happened in the last couple of years is that because of the whole industry was educating everybody who was willing to listen that data is so critical, data scientists are important, so advertisers are now hiring data scientists and they're starting to compute their own ROI based on their numbers rather than based on numbers which is showed to them by agency or the DSP. And that creates pressure. They push back on what should change in the technology in order for these numbers to look better. And that creates the dynamics. And essentially, it's working towards advertisers' true goals, which push customization across the rest of the demand-side ecosystem. So here is a very quick how to customize technology, taking into account what actually advertisers want. Now, on the left is a very quick recap of Marketing 101. And apologies for those in the audience who actually know marketing. It's a very, very simplified version just to get my point across. So the advertiser maps their customers into this simplified funnel. And then depending on where they are in the funnel, they would want to use different media and different technologies to reach those clients. Now, the thing to notice here is on the digital side, the display and video ads are really without much competition at the very top of the funnel when we want to create brand awareness and product awareness. As you go down, as you switch from sort of brand marketing to direct marketing, you start seeing very strong digital channels which are not display. Like you see search and product evaluation. You see some in-website marketing, like offering real-time discounts on the purchase side. And then when it comes to loyalty, again, you have social and you have email marketing. So in many ways, the display as a channel is a complementary to those main ones. And that's important because that creates an interesting dynamics around attribution problem. So how the programmatic approach changed or modified this picture? Well, essentially, we don't see much pressure from the advertisers at the very top of the funnel. the work on brand awareness is still largely done by agencies. Advertisers more or less give them a pile of money and say, just do something useful with those money. They're not yet going and checking the results thoroughly, partly because nobody knows how to check the results, partly because that's just tradition. On the other hand, at the bottom of this, pretty much everything where with re in it, like retargeting of search or retargeting of site visits, there the advertiser is very much aware of what's going on. The advertiser has some metrics, typically around conversions, and those metrics are exposed to the advertiser by the system, and they start thinking and talking about it. So when presented with a retargeting opportunity, the advertiser is not terribly happy, or at least somewhat unhappy, mostly because of those three reasons. And again, the primary reason is because the display channel is not the primary channel, the advertiser already spends a ton of money, say, on search. So they spend money to get the user to the site. And now we ask them to spend a bit more money to get the user back to the site, and they try to understand how much of that value of this returning user, how much of that value needs to go back to the search channel, and how much of it is incremental and needs to be paid for the display media spend. So because it's difficult, and people talk about attribution model here already, for that very reason, the advertiser doesn't particularly trust the ROI numbers which are presented by technology vendors. And because they don't trust ROI numbers, they basically don't think that that particular way of buying media is overrepresented in the existing media buying digital mix. So we see this pressure, and we see how custom technology execution can help to overcome it. And just to bring this story back to life a little bit, let's go through a more or less real case scenarios of how the retargeting reattribution happens in sort of real life. So a technology vendor, an ad tech vendor, comes in and runs a campaign which targeted to site visitors and track conversions, and their favorite post-view conversion metrics shows that 4% conversion rate after the user see the ad. So that's the data which they present, and pretty much the technology vendor wants to move on and discuss the renewal of the budget in this case. So the 4% number is exposed to the client. We hope the client is happy, and that's it. Now, it used to be the case the client used to be happy, but now we told them to hire data scientists, so those data scientists look at data, and what they do, they say, well, just hold on. Here's my other data from maybe Omnisure system or from some other system which we actually, advertiser happens to have these days, and it shows what happens with the same conversions when the user hasn't seen any ads. So you know what, an hour after click, and let's say that this particular advertiser, 68% of visitors to the site are search visitors, so in order to get to the site they click on some search ad. So they know when they click, so they measure time, and 4% of people who haven't seen the ad converted 1 hour after the click, and only 1% converted if they did see the ads. And they kind of put this on the table and say, well, doesn't make sense. Can you please explain how on earth did you drive any incremental revenue if your conversions are actually worse than the conversions without any ads? Well, at this point, the technology vendor comes back and says, okay, guys, we have a problem. Can we get our own data scientist to go and talk to the advertiser? The data scientist comes in, and being data scientist, he spends, a good week trying to discuss whether the advertiser can actually count. The data actually comes from a different system. So the technology vendor doesn't have access to the data, and they need to make sure that they calculated everything correctly. So after this week is spent, and assuming the relationship is still there, they actually start thinking what actually happens. Well, it takes them another week, and they come back and say, well, we solved your problem. There is a correlation here, but that doesn't mean causation, and that's problem solved. To which the advertiser asks them to explain it in English, if possible, which is a problem for data scientists. They didn't have a degree in English, so they go back for another week They come back and say, well, we have an explanation in plain English, and it works like that. Users, in order to see the ad, a user needs to leave your website. You don't allow us to show ads on your own website. Now, out of those users who left the site in the first hour, most of them didn't like your product or didn't even want to search it, to click on this search ad in the first place. So those users are overrepresented in the users who had even an opportunity to see the ad. So by showing an ad in the retargeting setup, you do two different things. One thing which you do, which is a useful thing, is that you encourage user to come back to the site and do something. And the other thing, which is totally useless, which you're doing with exactly the same impression, is that you basically mark the users who lost interest. So out of all the people who lost interest, they're overrepresented, and that's why there is a bias in the data, and that's why post-view conversions look like they behave worse than conversions without any ads. And at that point, again, data scientists think that their job is done and they want to walk away. However, the advertiser feels that that's not job done. They still want to understand what is the incremental lift, how much they actually need to pay for those users who are marked as lost interest. And believe it or not, the request to remove bias from this collected data is actually a complicated scientific request. It takes a poor data scientist 2 months to do it. He uses hidden Markov chain modeling. He uses maximized log likelihood, and because it's not a convex problem. So anyway, he goes into the room and bored everybody for 15 minutes before actually finally putting this graph, which removes bias from their attribution data. Now, again, I'm not joking. It's a complicated problem. It's a complicated problem which could be solved, and the results roughly look like this. For the first 6 hours, it doesn't really matter if you show any ads whatsoever, because either the user doesn't like what he sees and they're going anyway, or the user sort of likes and then they come back and they just needed to check, Facebook or Yahoo Mail or something. So after the 6 hours, things get better, and you're actually now reminding users something which they wanted to do. So there is some incremental lift, and a week after the search click, you're probably collecting 0.5, 0.8% of an incremental lift compared to the situation without conversions. Now, advertiser actually gets all that. In many ways, he knew probably the whole story even beforehand, because that's how the advertisers understand their search business metrics. And then the advertiser respectively shows that despite all these terrific findings, the display media spend is heavily biased towards the very beginning of the tracking period. So because of the way retargeting works, you end up, in that example, you end up spending maybe 2/3 of your media budget showing ads to users who are less than 6 hours away from the click. And that's upsetting. So only 1/3 maybe worked, and even that worked at a very slow uplift. So that's the sorry state of how advertisers sees the ROI from their perspective. And the way you fix it, or the way you try to fix it, is offering some custom solutions to the advertiser. So that's how it works, and that alleviates some of the problems. The biggest issue here is that even if you can do attribution correctly, which is difficult, it's almost impossible to explain how on earth you computed the probability of something happening if the ad wasn't shown. That's, you need to do complicated modeling. The results of it is difficult to explain. So instead of doing attribution, you try to avoid this problem altogether. You say, look, okay, the first part is very easy. We receive a bid. If it's a recent visitor, we proceed. Otherwise, we don't. That's, if it's a site visitor. So that's site visitor, how site visiting works in the retargeting. Then you have a custom module where you try to evaluate whether this particular opportunity, whether this user is likely to convert without you spending any additional media dollars on this. And it could be for multiple reasons, and actually your advertiser will be extremely helpful in actually explaining you why the users convert anyway. They could be a former customer, they could be a search visitor within 20 minutes of the search click, they could be a repeated visitor, they could be a subscriber. They might have already made the purchase at the end, so there is no point showing them this media after they made the purchase. Now, once you realize that it's not one of those, so you're really talking about a true incremental opportunity here, you proceed and you try to estimate how much incremental revenue this particular user actually can bring. Now, that involves on one side looking at the sites, like whether the site is any good. On the other side, you need some model, which again is deeply custom to the advertiser, about how to compute incremental revenue in the first place. So once you estimate that, and it could come up to a few cents, which is nothing to be scornful about, because few cents in this language translates into $10 to $20 CPM in our industry favorite metrics. So you need to take this number, and then because you're working for the advertiser, and because you want to improve ROI for this advertiser, and because you want to decrease the media spending for this advertiser, after all, the media spend is in the denominator of the ROI, what you do, you try to understand whether you are facing a true second price auction from SSP, or whether SSP has some sort of dynamic floor after adjusted whatever technology. In the first case, it's quite safe to go and bid $20 and basically pay through the magic of the second price, you end up paying like $1. In the second case, if you were to bid $20, you would end up paying 18 miraculously because of this outer adjusting floor actually working. And you really need to go back and understand what's this actual opportunity, actually what's the true clearing price, and it could be like $1, so you end up bidding $1.20 and paying $1.10 or something. So that's the piece which is important. It actually reduces, especially for the retargeting, it substantially reduces the media cost of the whole thing. So by putting all of this together, what do you get? It's the main thing which you achieved, you actually reduced media cost, and you convinced, through this first custom module, you convinced the advertiser that you are bringing incremental revenue. Now, for this incremental revenue, the advertiser is actually willing to pay more. So for normal conversion, they would pay you, $30. For that incremental conversion, they might go and pay $150 because they now know it's truly incremental. Now, and yes, as I said, reducing media cost will improve their ROI. And the first point over there, again, I made it already, because you are designing a custom system which avoids spending money on people who convert anyway, you sort of focus on incremental revenue instead of spending this money and then solving attribution. Attribution is difficult, don't solve it, just avoid the problem by pushing the media spend to those users who are unlikely to convert based on any reasonable models. Anyway, so in order to run it, you need a lot of data. You need to know, and most of this data actually sits in some sense in advertiser side of the system, not in the media trader side of the system. Now, that approach conceptually is not just restricted to retargeting. It works across more or less all direct campaigns. So take an airline industry. You want to target students in Amsterdam using a third-party data. You want to show them, give them 10% discount for airline during some holidays, and you're prepared to measure it with ticket sales, again, some promotion codes and whatever. Now, that's the bog standard direct campaign. Without customization, you can run it as is, and the advertiser would be willing to pay you, $30 per conversion, because they know that some of that promotions will go to users who are to the flights who are booked anyway. Some of those go to users who will be buying the ticket anyway. So by putting a custom module into that product in that campaign execution, and in particular by excluding existing customers, using frequent flyers, excluding oversold route, by not spending media there, you basically improve the value for the advertiser. They now understand that whatever conversions come that way are conversions which they wouldn't have gotten in any other shape or form. So they tell you, the plane is half empty anyway, so I give you $150 for conversion instead of my usual $30. At the very same time, you reduce the media spend, and that means you get ROI up. What's the implications for technology which you need in order to drive all this execution? For starters, you need really deep integration with advertiser systems. You need their customer database, and you need some sort of product inventory or reservation systems in order to identify the routes which are likely to be oversold and routes which are still half empty. Now, the other interesting consideration is that by the time you've done all this work for the advertiser, by the time you customize the system, you really know a lot about the advertiser's business, and some of that knowledge advertiser is really not happy to share. the segments are valuable, all those promotional metrics are valuable, this algorithms or the rules you are using to find out whether the user will convert or will not, they're valuable. So they want to segment their system. They want to keep it close to their chest. They don't want to share it even with the same, well, especially with similar businesses in the same industry. The other interesting point is that those direct campaigns, once you talk to advertisers, they actually change rather quickly. They want to iterate quickly. One day they want students in Amsterdam, and a week later they want high-worth individuals in Indonesia to sell them the business class offers. So you need to be able to connect on your data sources. You need to keep integrating with other systems which customer has, and then you need to have this complex targeting and exclusion capabilities. So these three are probably the biggest differentiators. You need to put them in front in order for the advertiser to buy it. And then on top of that, you need machine learning, you need some optimization loops to make sure ROI is there. And you need media spend efficiency, which is just a polite way of saying that you want to reduce the media spend, you can't really sell it on rev share because you're kind of working against you. You need to sell it on a service fee or flat CPM or something, but it can't be rev share. Now, that technology actually can be built today and is built today, and you can put it to work with advertisers or with agencies who want to get results for advertisers. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, there are a few internet scale problems which need solution which kind of feeds into this custom layer of technology. So those custom silos or custom bits of technology executions are very close to the advertisers, and they're very good at solving specific problems for those advertisers. They're not good at solving internet scale challenges. Now, I didn't put all of them here. Now, one which we like most is you need some smart access to the worldwide bit stream. The worldwide bit stream is huge. We're talking about millions of bits per second, billions of hundreds of billions of heads of opportunities to show an ad per day. No single advertiser ever need access to this whole pipe. It's just too expensive. They need a part of it. And that part is small, but very, very non-trivial. Today they need Amsterdam, tomorrow they need Indonesia, and then they only want like young male or something. So whichever provider puts it together, they need to be able to allow the advertiser flexibly pick up a relevant part of the bit stream. And it should include like quality local publishers, and it should be global. Most of the advertisers who have interest in this solution, they're already global advertisers. They have interests not just in Europe, but in Asia, in Japan, in America, all over the place. Now, the other piece, which again, advertiser is not positioned to solve, and the provider for the custom technology for the advertiser is not positioned to solve, is filtering for all the kind of odd stuff which is going on. And the data here is not terribly encouraging. I mean, some data you see is that 30–40% of bids are coming from something odd. Now, bots, like non-humans, actually even humans, I mean, if you have a heavy gaming site and the person is busy gaming, don't show them promotion. It wouldn't improve your ROI. So that type of filtering capability is very difficult to do on the advertiser scale. You need to have internet scale solution. And then another problem, which I think gets more and more complicated as the closer we get to Mozilla shutting down cookies, you need to track users in some way, because otherwise this whole thing breaks down. You need to track them across devices, which would be a plus, because more and more of them see your promotions on mobile devices. But actually, even tracking them across the internet gets harder. That's an industry-wide problem. You need to solve that in order for the advertiser to be able to appreciate this custom solution. So that's a quick summary. We educated advertisers that ROI is important. They now went and compute their ROI, and they now push back on the industry to modify solutions in a very custom way in order for their ROI to look better. We feel, and that's our experience so far, is that the only way to get there is by heavily customizing the demand-side solutions. Thank you for your time.